Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video, and welcome to another Jane Austen July vlog. Today is Monday the 22nd of July, so we've got a week and a bit left of Jane Austen July. My reading is going mediumly. I have read some things, I haven't read that many things, but I've been enjoying what I've been reading so far. So I think the only thing that I have finished since the end of my last vlog was Sense and Sensibility, which I was very nearly done with when I finished the last vlog, and I really love this. It's wonderful. It's Jane Austen, of course it's wonderful. I have also now started reading Sanditon, one of Jane Austen's unfinished books. I haven't finished that yet, even though I think maybe I'm meant to for the read along. I need to catch up on that maybe tonight. Then I'm also listening to Emma on audiobook. I am about a third of the way through and loving it, as I always do, because as I said, Jane Austen is amazing. Then I've also been reading a historical middle grade murder mystery set in the Georgian period, Drama and Danger, the first book in the Lizzie and Belle mysteries by J.T. Williams, and I'm really loving that so far. It's excellent fun, very easy reading, and I'm really enjoying that. I'm about halfway through now, so I'm looking forward to finding out what happens in the end. Then I'm also a little bit into quite a few different non-fiction books, so I definitely need to get a move on with my non-fiction reading for Jane Austen July. I am maybe a quarter of the way through The Anarchy by William Dalrymple, which is a history of the rise of the East India Company, which I'm finding really interesting. Then I'm also a bit of the way through The Travels of Dean Mahomet, an 18th century journey through India, which is a book from 1794. I have basically put this on pause until I finish The Anarchy, because I think the context of that will be quite useful for this, but I am really looking forward to it. And then I am also very near the beginning of Gentlemen of Uncertain Fortune by Rory Moore, which I'm finding really interesting so far, but I haven't read very much of. So basically I've ended up doing in July exactly what I did in June, which is start too many books and then be anxious about whether or not I'm going to manage to finish them all by the end of the month. So I will do my best. I'm reading lots of interesting things. I also wanted to say that last night I watched the 2005 Pride and Prejudice film, which I hadn't seen for ages actually. It was really good. I'd forgotten how much I love that film, and it was really interesting. I was watching it with my husband Nick, who has read Pride and Prejudice, has seen the 1995 adaptation, but hadn't seen the 2005 film before, and he really loved it. I do love the 1995 one, and I know it's very controversial to say, but I actually think the 2005 one is better. I just think the characterization is better of maybe everyone except Wickham. You barely get to see Wickham, that's a shame, but the look of it is amazing, and some of the shots are just fantastic, and I feel like they get the gritty, messy, not everything was super polished and fancy vibe, which just works so well. And Mrs. Bennet is done really well, and in a much more sympathetic way that fits with my interpretation of her as a character. Mr. Collins is amazing. I feel like the interpretation of Mr. Darcy in the 2005 adaptation is much more in line with my interpretation of Darcy, and I just think it's a really fantastic film. And it was really nice as well to watch it with Nick, because I've watched it so many times before over a really long period of time that I kind of had forgotten just how amazing it was. But watching it with someone who hadn't seen it before, who was so impressed by it as a film, just reminded me what a great film it was. So that was really fun as well. Anyway, I feel like this has been enough of a ramble for the beginning of a Jane Austen July vlog, so that's all for now, and I will check in again later in the week. Hello again, it is Wednesday the 24th of July and I have finished off two things since I last spoke to you. So I finished reading Sanditon by Jane Austen, her fragment unfinished novel, which I enjoyed. I did think what I thought about it the last time I read it, which is that it's so short, you get so little. I feel like you get a great setting and a few potentially interesting characters, but you don't really get more than that. I feel like the Watsons gives you more, so I'm really looking forward to reading the Watsons, which I will be starting imminently. I do find Sanditon interesting. I feel like it's sad that Jane Austen didn't live to finish it, but what there is, I don't feel like I have enough of it to know what to make of it, if that makes sense. But there we go. And then I also finished off Drama and Danger, book one in the Lizzie and Belle mysteries by J.T. Williams, which is a fun middle grade mystery. I keep on wanting to say murder mystery, but it's like an attempted murder mystery about two young Black British girls in Georgian England trying to work out what has happened after someone tries to kill Lizzie's dad, Ignatius Santro. It was just a really fun mystery with great characterization, but I also feel like it dealt with a lot of more serious themes and looked really interestingly at a lot of elements of Black British history. I feel like if you were a child reading this, you would learn a lot, but like it wouldn't be overwhelming. So I feel like it just had a nice balance. I feel like children would enjoy it, and as an adult, I enjoyed it very much too. So that was excellent fun. And then I am continuing to read the many other things that I am reading. I feel like I am definitely reading too many things for this point in the month and I'm not going to end up finishing them all. I'm continuing to listen to Emma, which I am thoroughly enjoying, as I always do. It's excellent and I really love it, but I'm just in the middle of multiple audiobooks, in the middle of multiple physical books, feeling slightly overwhelmed by all the reading. I don't know why for the last 2 months I have been reading lots of things at the same time, because that's not how I like to read. Like in general, I like one audiobook and one physical book at once. And that's all. And somehow I've ended up reading a lot of books at the same time for the last few months. And I find that stressful. So I need to finish off all the books I'm currently reading and then not do that in August and September. So yes, I will carry on with all the books that I'm reading and I will check in again soon. Hello, it is Monday the 29th of July. Jane Austen July is nearly over. I feel like I've done very little vlogging over the last few days, had a busy weekend, went to see Spirited Away in the theatre, which was very exciting, played lots of Dungeons and Dragons, did very little reading. However, I have managed to finish off the two Jane Austen works that I was reading. So I have indeed finished off reading The Watsons by Jane Austen a few days ahead of the read-along schedule, but I was just so enjoying it and it's so short. I'm so sad that Jane Austen never finished The Watsons. Like, I do like Sanditon, but I like the Watsons so much more, and I feel like it's so interesting, and I love the character set up and the kind of dynamics, and I'm really sad that Jane Austen put it aside. I do feel that it has a bit of a Emma vibe to it, not just in the fact that we have a Emma Watson in the Watsons, and we later ended up with an Emma Woodhouse in Emma, but I do feel like the sort of small town setting and the kind of like invalid father, I do feel like those elements from the Watsons may have ended up in Emma.
So it was quite interesting to be reading the Watsons while listening to Emma, but I do still wish the Watsons had been finished because I do love it a lot. And then meanwhile, I have also finished off listening to Emma on audiobook, the audiobook narrated by Juliet Stevenson, and I just really, really enjoyed this one. Emma is a Jane Austen novel that really grows on me every time I read it, and I find Emma frustrating as a character in some ways, but I also really, really enjoy reading about her and all the people around her. And I love the setting of Emma, you know, the large village, small town of Highbury. I love all the subplots in Emma. I love all the minor characters, and it's just such an utter joy to read. So I've been very, very much enjoying rereading Emma, and I just finished that off just now and loved it a lot. So there we go, 2 more things completed before the end of July. Can I get through any of my non-fiction in the next few days? We will just see, and I will check in again soon.
Well, hello, it is Wednesday evening, the 31st of July, the last day of Jane Austen July. It's quite late in the evening, and that's why it's quite shadowy, but I thought I would give a final reading update for this Jane Austen July vlog. And I've made some progress since I last checked in, so I have more or less finished The Travels of Dean Mahomet. There is still some end matter that I have left to read, but hopefully I'll finish that off in the next day or two, and I have read the main thing I wanted to read, which is the 1790s book written by Dean Mahomet. So I have managed to tick off just about the goal of reading something written by a contemporary of Jane Austen. And I found this quite an interesting book, and especially interesting to read alongside The Anarchy, which we'll talk about in a minute. There were a lot of interesting things about this. It is, as I have said in other videos and vlogs, a book that is sort of partway between memoir and travel writing, written by Dean Mahomet, who was born in India, ended up becoming an officer in the East India Company Army, and then ended up moving to Ireland and then later to England. And it's a book that is about India and about his life in India as an officer in the East India Company Army. But it's also a book about India very much aimed at late 18th century Europeans, which is really interesting. So I feel like this book is both really interesting in sort of what Dean Mahomet is saying, but it's also really interesting to see how he says it because of who he's saying it to. Even just the simple fact that it is very much in the style of sort of 18th century travel writing, and it's a non-fiction work written in an epistolary form. So he's sort of addressing a European friend, and begins every chapter saying sort of "Dear Sir," but that's the only thing about it that feels like a letter, which just reminds me of 18th century epistolary novels where you're like, this doesn't read like a letter at all, but obviously that's the form of it. So I found that kind of interesting too. And there were lots of interesting bits, even just like there was a bit where he was describing like what an elephant was and just going into like really great detail about the physical attributes of an elephant, because he knew that hardly anyone reading this book would have seen an elephant before. So lots of just like really interesting bits like that. There were quite a few bits where I was finding it hard to follow or felt like I was missing context, but in general I found this a really interesting read. And then, as I said, I have also been listening to The Anarchy by William Dalrymple, which is a history of the rise of the East India Company, which I'm so nearly finished. I was really hoping I'd manage to finish it on the last day of Jane Austen July, but I've got like an hour left of the audiobook and it's like 10:30 at night, so I don't think I'm going to manage to finish it, but tomorrow I'll probably finish it, and you know, we'll cap that as a Jane Austen July read. I found this really, really interesting. interesting, just a fascinating look at British and Indian history. I will say that it is very much like a narrative political history of this happened and then this happened and then this happened, which isn't my favourite kind of history book. So I'm finding it really interesting, but I just feel like I get a bit less out of that kind of history book, I guess. I also wouldn't necessarily recommend the audiobook. The author uses a lot of primary sources, which I really, really like, but when you're listening to it on audiobook, sometimes you can't tell where a primary source quote starts or ends, which makes it a little bit confusing at times. So I kind of wish I'd read it physically, but I've still found it really interesting, and I don't have too much longer to go. So hopefully I should finish that soon. And then the other book I have been reading for my non-fiction prompt is this. This is A Gentleman of Uncertain Fortune by Rory Moore. How Younger Sons Made Their Way in Jane Austen's England. I am loving this so much. It is very much social history, which is my favourite kind of thing, and it's really, really interesting. I am on page 80, so I have not managed to finish this in Jane Austen July, but that is okay. I'm just going to take this over into August. I will finish this at some point in August. I will get to the end of it, but I thought I would just focus on the other things in Jane Austen July. So that is the end of my Jane Austen July. I feel like it's been a very odd Jane Austen July in which I have not read nearly as much as I wanted to read, and also I feel like my TBR was quite varied and I was ticking off lots of different prompts and reading lots of different kinds of books focused on lots of different things, and then I feel like my actual reading has ended up being just like a few bits of those rather than like the varied spread that I wanted, which is okay. I've read a lot of good things, but I definitely haven't read as much as I wanted to, and there's definitely lots of things I wanted to read that I didn't read. I'm disappointed that I didn't read any other fiction from Jane Austen's time. I did read some non-fiction published in Jane Austen's time, but I would have liked to read some fiction too. I was hoping to read a play or a novel, and I just didn't, but you know, it's been a busy month. That's okay. I feel like this has already been a bit of a rambly finish to this video, so I'm going to stop this vlog now. But if you have been taking part in Jane Austen July, I hope you've had a good Jane Austen July. Let me know what you've read, what was your favourite thing that you have read. And that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.